Hello, welcome back to day 2 of your inner navigation series. So good to be here with you all. Thank you for joining live. I'm so delighted that you're here and that you're coming to join me for day 2, where we're going to be exploring where you are now. So the purpose of today, yesterday having been a little bit of introductions, a little bit of context setting, today we're going to move into getting your navigation system lit up to tune it into where you are right now, and of course to tune it into whether I can help you. But equally, what I've discovered through my journey is that by tuning into whether somebody could help me, sometimes it was a very clear no, and that no was super helpful to then sending me on to something else. So whichever way it goes for you today, I really hope that the purpose, my intent is that it brings that clarity to you, whether it's a yes or a no. Because at one point, I think, quite a few points, I think I've thought along my journey that that there was one way. I've continually thought I've found the thing. I've found the one thing, which is the thing that ends all things. And it's this one way of developing, or of exploring, of realising, oh my goodness, I found the one way. And I kept doing that. In fact, my husband at one point laughed at me. It's like, oh, another thing. Like, there's always another thing. And I've come to realise that, yes, there are multiple right things. And the whole point for me of our exploration and our journey through life is that we come and meet those right things when they're right for us. And if they're not right for us at that time, then we have a no. And that doesn't mean it's a no forever. It could well mean that that thing comes back to us again in the future. But it's just a no right there and then for that thing. Great. And if it's a yes, then great. And you move forward with that thing. And it's the perfect thing for that moment. It's like the coming together of the perfect ingredients just at the right time, just at the right temperature, just for the right person, in order to create exactly what's wanted and what's needed at that time. Hi everybody who's joining, thanks for joining. So that's the point of today, is to essentially talk about what my shop is about, talk about who I help, how I help them, why I help them. Because back to that point of there are multiple ways we can explore, there are multiple ways we can develop, there are multiple ways we can support and catalyse change or shifts or recognitions in our lives. The clearer I can be about what I do, my shop front, what's available here, the clearer my signpost is, the more easily you're able to tap into that inner navigation of your own and say, well, is that a yes or a no? And then that makes your life easier. You know, if you're navigating on a journey down a road, we really love those road signs. Have you ever had that where you're trying to find somewhere and there are like, there's a road sign, there's a road sign, there's a road sign, and then suddenly they stop putting signposts up and you now have no idea which way you're meant to go to find whatever it is you were trying to find. This is perhaps like electronic maps on our phones like we have these days. So my intention is that by putting a sign up and saying this is what it's all about here, then you get to know if you want to come here. And if you don't, then great, because you'll find another signpost and you'll find somebody else's signs to follow to the thing that you need right now with them. I've actually just come off a call with somebody who were having that very conversation and saying that things that we've come up, we've like discovered in life, and we've had a strong resistance to it and gone, oh no, I don't want to do that. But in fact, later it's come back and it's been the perfect thing to do. Resistance to me is actually a really good sign of a direction to go in. So as much as I'm saying here, you know, this is to tune up your inner navigation to get your clear yes or no, sometimes we can have resistance to a person, to what they seem to be doing. I've actually had that recently with somebody who I've been connecting with, who provides a certain kind of service, and I've recognised how resistance isn't telling us what we thought it was. So I would used to feel resistance and think, oh, well, that's not the way to go. Whereas now I've realised that actually beneath resistance there can be a yes. And the resistance is purely the mind that is afraid of going in that direction. Every single time I've listened to the yes and not listened to the mental resistance, it has been the perfect direction to go in. And there has always been gold on the other side of it. So just distinguish between a yes and a no, which are very pure and clean and clear, and that feeling of resistance, that, oh no, I don't like that, that looks terrible. But with there's not just the ability to go, no thank you. There's like oh no, that looks terrible, terrifying, dangerous. That's a sign of our resistance, which, as I say, can sometimes mask a very beautiful yes beneath it. So use that as your starting point to, perhaps even right now, think of times when you've had a very clear and clean yes, times when you've had a very clear and clean no, and times when you've had a yes or no that's been overshadowed by resistance. And notice those times when there was resistance. What did you do with that? Did you continue moving forward anyway? And then what happened? And were there times when you listened to the resistance and didn't go in that direction, but it came up again later and you saw exactly what it was that it was intended to show you? So just, when watching the replay with this, obviously take a moment right now with this if you want to recall all of those examples, because it really helps us to get that feeling, calibrate with that feeling within ourselves of that yes and that no and that resistance and the different outcomes that came on the back of each of them. So so that's the point of today. I'm just checking my notes here. Yeah, so that's the point of today, to get you clear, to light up that inner navigation system with your yeses and nos, so that you navigate your life by the yeses that are right for you at the time that they're right for you. Because when we follow that always seems to be when magic happens. When we follow that yes of our heart, that's when magic happens. Kind of, I think, in some ways, irrespective of the tool, the approach, the modality, the person. There's just something about the magic of that yes. So pay attention to those in life generally, and of course as you're listening here today, so that you can check in with yourself and see, is there a yes to this? Is there a no to this? And that obviously doesn't preclude you from continuing to listen to the rest of the week if you get a no. It might do. You might choose to not join. That's totally cool. But my invitation is to stay with this through the week and just see what transpires and see what clicks for you. Because even if it's not to do something with me here, it might just be the instigator, the pointer that sends you to the absolute next right person. So what I'd like to do today then is talk to you about the kind of people who get the most from coming into the experience of my world and my work. Again, with that intention of, so that it lights up your inner navigation system, so you can listen to this experience of other people, but bring it into yourself, bring it into your own experience, and check and go, what of that resonates with me? Now, in truth, that's going to happen naturally anyway. There's a very quick process that happens when we're hearing about others, either directly from them or via somebody else. That system, the system of ours, is always doing that kind of inner check. Is that like me? Is that like me? Is that like me? It's kind of almost always looking for that safety of familiarity. But it's super helpful, because when we see ourselves reflected in another, that does help us. It is like looking in a mirror. You know, there's a reason we look in a mirror to do our makeup and our mascara, because we get to see ourselves more clearly. So this is like providing a mirror for you to look in that mirror and see, do I recognise myself in what Helen's sharing? Because then when we see ourselves more clearly, again, we can follow the signs more easily because we've seen who we are, we've seen how we are right now. And that's really the whole question that today's coming with. A question of where am I right now? And which naturally on the back of it comes with, and so therefore what's next? What is it that I really want right now? What is it that I'd really love? What is my next step forward? So when I reflected on the people who seem to experience the most magic in our work together, there were some common themes that came out. The primary one that kind of linked everybody initially when I considered it was that the people who come into my world often have a very strong and significant emotional experience. There are ups and downs, sometimes many of them throughout a day, a week, a month. And there's also a lot of confusion around these ups and downs because there's a lot of conditioning in the world about what's acceptable emotionally and what isn't acceptable. So the people who come to me who have these strong emotional experiences, but who have also been told that's wrong. They've also been told they shouldn't be like that. And so a lot of our work, and I'll talk more tomorrow about awakening and on Thursday about enlightenment, but the whole point of the work with us, therefore, is to ground in who you really are, awakening, and to enlighten from these psychological confusions that we've collected around our emotional and feeling experience. So that between both of those aspects of the exploration, you ground into the knowing of yourself, you ground into the okayness of who you really are, and you come into a healthy, loving relationship with all of your experience, which includes all of your feelings, all of your emotions. And both of those aspects of the exploration really shift our experience. So there are three paths almost that people have often travelled before arriving at my door. The first one is people who've been in an exploration, most commonly the three principles. So if you're not familiar with it, don't worry, you don't need to go looking for it if you don't want to. But if you have been in a three principles exploration, and the way most people come into my world is they've explored the three principles. It's an amazing doorway into the recognition of who we really are. And so very often when people come into that exploration, they have an experience of bliss, an experience of expansion and lightness and freedom. And then things seem to go wrong. And so people will say things like, I've lost it, I've forgotten it all, it's disappeared. Yes, something's gone wrong. That lovely experience is not here anymore. And so that's one of the times at which people will come into my world. The second example is people who've been in an inquiry into the belief of being a separate self. So again, if it's not something you've explored, I'm very happy to chat to you about it more if it's something you're interested in, because it is useful to the exploration that I offer. But again, it's not essential. It's not essential. So the people who've come through this path have often been in that very direct inquiry into what they're not. A very direct inquiry into seeing that they're not a separate self, which is a super useful inquiry if that's where your path takes you. It's incredibly impactful and powerful to recognise you're not the separate self that you've believed you are for so many years. And in that recognition, it's as though a lid is taken off. A believed limitation disappears. And with that believed limitation disappearing, what has been suppressed emotional experience and psychological experience can then come out to play. And this can create a lot of turbulence and a lot of disturbance in our inner world and in our outer world. And so that's the second time at which people come to me. The third example is people who've been in perhaps what we might call a normal spiritual kind of exploration, or really often more practices and rituals. So people who've perhaps worked with crystals or full moon rituals and practices, or colours or cards, oracle cards, tarot cards, all that kind of like what we might typically think of when we think of the word spiritual. And so when people from that experience come into my world, it's often because they've discovered there's no reliable relief. So it's like every time they go and read an oracle card, it's like, oh, phew, I'm all right, I've got the guidance, I can continue on my path. But then when we're not grounded in who we really are, it's like the fears and the emotional experience returns, and we're back into the whirlpools, really, connecting back into that metaphor I shared yesterday. And so then we're back to, well, I need the cards again now, or I need my crystals again now, or I need. And so that's the third group who will come to me, because there's a desire for and a knowing of a more stable level of contentment as a norm, for that relief that we experience in the moment of, phew, the card's given me the answer. There's a knowing of the more reliable sense of relief, the more reliable relief of the feeling of ourself. And so that's another time at which people can come into my world and join me. So just to go through those again. So the first one is where people have been in an exploration like the three principles. They've seen something impactful. They've seen something true. Or perhaps even, seen is kind of the best word there is. Something has been seen before the mind. Something has woken up in them, which is in fact who we really are. So they have woken up to who they really are. And on the back of that, they've experienced this period of ease and bliss and beautiful experience of life. And then what's happened is the mind has come back in, the whirlpools have come back in, and it looks like it's broken. It looks like it's not working anymore. So that was the first group. The second group were those who've done a direct self-inquiry, into the fact they're not a separate self. And those people have equally had a period of bliss, because they've seen through the belief in separation. Oh my goodness, it's elating to recognise that. And then again, the mind can come back in, the emotional experiences can come up more easily, they've been suppressed. And hence it looks like, again, something's gone wrong, it looks like it's broken, it looks like I've forgotten whatever it was I saw in that recognition. And then the third group was the group who've been in a more traditionally, what we count as spiritual world, with practices and rituals, and who've discovered there's no reliable contentment there, there's no reliable relief there. And so they're in the same patterns of thoughts and feelings and emotions, and it's not changing, it's not getting better. So with all three of these, the common theme and the thing that I support people with, which I'll be talking more about over the coming 2 days, is their awakening and their enlightenment. So supporting them with grounding into the knowing of who they are, and supporting them with the recognition of their safety with whatever their thought and feeling based experience is in that moment. So the awakening and the enlightenment. But most crucially to both of them, it's the knowing of that for themselves. So in my experience, and again, check this with your own experience, if this has been how you've found it as you've been in one of these spiritual explorations, I found that I was collecting a lot of other people's ideas. So certainly some things were being heard and seen on a deeper level, because I did experience shifts and changes in my life. But also a lot was being collected cognitively. A lot of other people's phrases and words and ways of pointing or guiding were being collected by the mind at an intellectual level. And so there was a lot of that I didn't really know for myself. Yes, these shifts had happened, so I knew something was happening, I knew something was going on, but I couldn't really explain it, and I couldn't really put my own language to it, because I was just absorbing the language of other people, almost trying their clothes on for size. And ultimately, this was kind of broken through and interrupted when I was working with somebody who was asking me, I can't remember what specifically he was asking me about, but something about my experience, how I experienced myself or how I experienced others or the world. I can't remember, but something along those lines. And he saw me going off into my mind, off into my intellect, trying to, cognitively remember, what's my answer to this? What's the right answer to this? And so he brought me back and he's like, well, but what do you know for yourself? Stumped. I was completely stumped. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, I don't know. At that moment in time, I felt complete confusion about what do I actually know for myself, about who I am, about what this world is, about how it's all happening. What do I know for myself versus what I've collected from other people? And I had no idea in that moment. And I remember sharing with a group I was in at that time the week after, and them equally saying, God, that's a really hard thing to kind of delineate and to separate between what's known and what's knowledge. What's deeply known and understood and what's been collected as a concept or an idea. And so that really became a big passion of mine, both, first of all, of course, for myself. That led me into very useful and powerful inquiries and understandings and shifts in my experience, which allowed me to know for myself who I really am and what's really going on. And then, of course, that gave me the grounding to support others with that process, not least through the book that Sarah Priestley and I wrote, The Complete Book of Awakening, which absolutely was instigated based on that question. What do you know for yourself? The whole premise of that book is for you to be able to do inquiries and to do your own explorations in order that you can know it for yourself and not have to rely on somebody like me or any other guide or teacher, because you know it for yourself. And so that's really my goal with everything I'm doing. I want you to know for yourself who you really are. I want you to know for yourself how okay you are with all of your thought and feeling and emotion-based experience. I want you to know for yourself that by being with that thought, feeling and emotional experience is the doorway through to everything you've been looking for. It is being with that exactly as it is, with no need for it to change. That shifts something deeply in our system, that has fears fall away, which therefore means that the next time that emotion shows up, the same domino effect of fears and worries doesn't happen, or certainly not as strongly, because we've recognised that what we've been so afraid of doesn't need to be feared. Of course, we were afraid of it when we were little. It was big. We felt too little to handle this, whatever this is. And oh my goodness, these big people around me are telling me it's wrong and I shouldn't be feeling this. I really have to get a handle on this. I really have to control this, suppress this, push this down, avoid this. This really must be scary. Look at how the grown-ups are responding to me while I'm having this emotional experience. So of course it got pushed down. Of course it got feared. Of course then we tried to avoid it. But by the time we've come into this exploration, by the time we've taken the lid off the confusion of who we've thought we are and seen through to the truth of who we are, that lid is off. And so whatever we've suppressed and tried to hold down, its nature is to move. Its nature is to want to move and change and come and go. And so, however it's been suppressed, I don't know, but in its unsuppression, it does just want to come up and be recognised and seen, and to return to its natural state of movement. And the more we do that, the more we feel that return to the flow of ourself. Remember again the river, when we're flowing right downstream, in that flow, not getting caught in the whirlpools along the way, we feel that feeling of flow in ourself. We feel that ease because we're now just in this moment now with this exactly as it is, with no need for it to change, which is how life is already. Absent of a mind that layers on a story about it having to be different, this already is that flow of emotions and feelings and thoughts. And the more we come into reality with that, the more we come into that clarity and knowing that we are okay with all of this exactly as it is, the more easily things return to flow, the more easily we return to that feeling of flow. And then that in turn supports us feeling that greater groundedness, relief, peacefulness, contentedness of our essential self, our essential nature, awakening, the recognition of who we are. So there's a lovely, mutually supportive synchronicity between awakening and enlightenment. I talk about them as two separate processes, as I really will be doing over the next couple of days, but they're really very mutually supportive, because the more I know who I really am, the more easily I can be with my thought and feeling and emotion-based experience. And the more I can be with my thought, feeling and emotion-based experience, the more that returns to flow and I'm not afraid of it, and therefore the more I feel the contented groundedness of my awake self, my awake nature. So there's a beautiful dance between these two, all of which move us in the direction of a purer, clearer expression of who we are. And all because you know it for yourself, not because you're relying on me, not because you're relying on anybody else. Trust me, I've been through that process, which wasn't wrong. You know, it's useful. It's so useful to have guides and coaches and pointers along the way. And I do recognise also how I was grasping, I need another podcast, I need another video, I need another session with my coach, because it looked like, I didn't know it for myself enough. I wasn't stable enough. I wasn't grounded enough in who I am. So there was this, I need that. Actually super helpful, because it kept me looking, it kept me exploring, it kept me in the conversation, and ultimately in that desire of wanting to know for myself, which is why that's what I want for you too. So that in knowing for yourself, you no longer need to feel in that space of oscillation between feeling blissful and then feeling caught up in thoughts, emotions, feelings, life. You no longer need to wonder, God, should I ever have set out on this path? You no longer need to do that grasping for, I need another. Again, that's not wrong. Really hear me when I say that's not wrong. But I can also tell you it's very much nicer and easier not to need to do that. So that you could also have this experience of ease and flow. Knowing who you are, knowing that your experience is nothing to be feared. And then in fact circling all the way back round to the beginning of the conversation, from that space, our yeses and nos becomes so much easier to hear. Because all the noise of the whirlpools, which is what creates the resistance I talked about at the beginning, all that noise of the resistant whirlpools, in the absence of believing any of that, the yeses and nos just become much more obvious, much more evident, which then makes it even easier to find our next step on the path. I've certainly seen that over and over again. The next right thing comes just as it's needed. It's really quite incredible. And so you move from this obvious next thing to this obvious next thing to this, always uniquely laid out for you, for your unique journey, for what your unique system needs and wants next. There is no one right path. There is no single silver bullet of development approach or tool or technique. There is this amazing sweet shop plethora of options. And all that matters, really all that matters, is that you do what's yes next for you. Because then that will take you to your next yes and then your next one. All of which, as I say, becomes so much easier as we continue on the path. We deepen into the awakening of who we are. We continue to integrate the enlightenment of our confused psychological whirlpool stories. And so the yeses and nos get clearer and the next step on the path gets clearer. It's a positively fulfilling spiral of increasing ease and flow and grace. So really, what's not to love about that? So I've shared there today about the kinds of experiences people are having that brings them to me. The kinds of signs I mentioned there towards the end of what might be going on, like the oscillation, like the wondering, should I even have set foot on this path? The reaching for the next course, the next video, the next coach. And what I really want is that you know for yourself. You know for yourself who you really are. You know for yourself how your system works, as described by that river metaphor I shared yesterday. And that you know for yourself that you are okay in every single experience you are having and have ever had. So that you too can live as yourself, as that full expression. So I would really, really love to hear any thoughts or questions that have come from this sharing today. As I mentioned yesterday, I'll be doing a Q&A on Saturday. So any questions you want to drop through on comments or in my DMs, or drop me a line through the website. I've got the Get in Touch page there. Any way you want to get in touch, then do that. Actually, you might be watching this on YouTube. Obviously, there's also comments on there. Whichever makes sense. I'd love to hear what's come up for you from today, what questions it's brought for you, what doesn't make sense, what you just want to acknowledge that's resonated for you, what you've loved or appreciated about this. And also just as an extra pointer, so what day are we on? Yeah, a few days ago, Piers Thurston released his latest episode on his podcast, Quality of Mind, which is a conversation with me, which kind of builds on some of what we've talked about today. So if you want a little bit more of this, if you want a little bit more conversation around it, if you want to hear the back and forth between Piers and I about this distinction of awakening and enlightenment, but also about I share in that as well the people that it seems that I help the most because of, well, it's just what's making sense. It's the people who are receiving the most magic when they get that yes and they come into my world. This is what my work is. This is my passion. This is what I care about. You knowing who you are, you knowing what's going on with your experience, and knowing that assuredly for yourself without any need to look to anybody else. You can if you want, but you know it for yourself. In truth, you already do. But in our forgetting, it's really nice to have somebody who can remind us. So I really hope this has been useful for you today. As I say, I look forward to hearing what thoughts and questions you have on the back of it. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow when, as I say, we'll be talking about awakening in more depth and exploring that. And I'll be bringing an inquiry for you to do live on the call so that you can have your own experience of feeling that beautiful recognition of your awake self. So much love to you. Thank you so much for joining, everybody who's joined live. I've seen your names popping up there. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, 2 o'clock p.m. UK time. Take care. Bye.